Hello everyone. Thank you all for watching the video and leaving meaningful comments. Wishing everyone good health and happiness.
Early in the morning, as the first rays of sunlight gently filtered through the leaves, I stepped into the grapefruit garden behind my house, a place I visited daily as an indispensable habit. The air was fresh and cool, carrying the slight chill of dawn, blending with the delicate, pure fragrance of ripe grapefruits hanging lazily on the branches. Dewdrops glistened on the leaves, sparkling like tiny gems, making the entire garden radiate a pristine beauty. I stood still for a moment, admiring the scene, then decided to reach out and pick a particularly eye-catching grapefruit, its green skin smooth, round, and heavy in my hand. I brought it inside, grabbed a small knife, and carefully sliced it in half. The juicy grapefruit segments revealed themselves, white and fragrant. I pulled apart one segment and tasted it, its sweet and refreshing flavor spread across my tongue, with a subtle hint of sourness that made me exclaim at its unexpectedly delicious taste. Seeing how good the grapefruit was, an idea suddenly came to me: why not pick more to sell at the market? I quickly grabbed an old bamboo basket sitting under the eaves of the house, wiped off its dust, and headed back to the garden with excitement. Walking between rows of trees, I carefully selected each ripe grapefruit, not too green nor overly ripe, the ones I knew would surely satisfy buyers. My hands worked swiftly as I picked each fruit and neatly arranged them in the basket, gradually filling it up. Each time I bent down or reached up high, I could hear the rustling of leaves and birds chirping somewhere on the branches, as if they were harmonizing with my rhythm. Sweat rolled down my forehead, but I didn't mind. I was too engrossed in imagining people delighting in buying my grapefruits. After a while, the basket was full to the brim and so heavy that I had to use both hands to lift it. Carrying it on my shoulder, I walked out of the garden and followed a small dirt path leading to the village market. The early morning market was bustling with people. Chatter and laughter mixed with lively bargaining sounds filled the air. I placed my basket of grapefruits at a familiar corner and began calling out to customers. Passers-by glanced over, some stopped to ask questions and complimented how fresh and beautiful my grapefruits looked. Smiling, I replied with a few stories about my garden, and they happily chose their purchases. In no time at all, each grapefruit left the basket in exchange for small bills still warm from the buyer's hands. Seeing my basket gradually empty filled me with an indescribable joy. Counting the money I earned carefully before tucking it into my pocket, I decided to stop by a nearby convenience store. There, I picked out a brand new watering can, a shiny silver one, that I had been eyeing for a while to water vegetables in my garden. Holding it in my hands, I imagined streams of cool water spraying over lush green vegetable beds, feeling an eager anticipation in my heart. By now, daylight had fully broken through. The sun grew harsher as I carried my watering can home, bringing along the happiness of a fulfilling morning. At James's lumber workshop, the atmosphere was more bustling than usual that day as a large truck had just arrived, carrying neatly squared logs with smooth surfaces and a fresh, resinous scent from being freshly cut. The sound of saws starting up echoed in the distance, blending with the laughter and chatter of workers unloading the shipment, creating a lively and energetic scene. Meanwhile, I had just returned home from the market, my flip-flops still dusty with red soil from the village road. Stepping into the kitchen, I noticed the pile of dishes from last night's dinner still stacked in the sink, dried rice sticking stubbornly to them, a sight that made me sigh. Rolling up my sleeves, I turned on the faucet and began scrubbing each dish. The sound of running water trickled steadily as white soap suds foamed up, and my hands moved quickly to finish the chore so I could take a short rest after the busy morning at the market. Just then, James suddenly appeared at the doorway. His tall figure stood there with a kind smile on his face, startling me slightly. He stepped inside, leaving faint traces of sawdust on the floor from his shoes. I wiped my hands on my apron and invited him to sit on an old wooden chair by the table, and we began to chat. He spoke enthusiastically about the new shipment of wood that had just arrived, his voice carrying both excitement and a hint of fatigue from a busy day at work. I listened attentively, occasionally nodding as his eyes lit up when he mentioned particularly beautiful pieces of wood he had selected. Suddenly, he looked at me intently, his deep gaze seeming to hold something important he wanted to say. Then, unexpectedly, he gently took my hand. His rough yet warm hand sent my heart racing uncontrollably. His voice softened as he confessed his feelings to me. Each sincere word seemed to seep into my heart, leaving me flustered and unsure how to respond. Just at that moment, the shrill ring of a phone interrupted our awkward yet tender moment. James frowned slightly as he pulled out his phone. It was a call from the workshop asking him to return quickly to check on the newly arrived shipment. He apologized with an apologetic look, and we both hurriedly stood up and headed together to the lumberyard. Upon arrival, the fresh scent of wood filled the air. Stacks of logs towered high, their golden grains highlighted by sunlight streaming down on them. James immediately got to work inspecting paperwork and cross-checking numbers on invoices with meticulous focus etched on his face. I stood nearby, watching as he carefully examined each log, running his hand over their surfaces to check their quality. His sharp gaze revealed his attention to detail while still exuding a gentle demeanor. Once everything was sorted out, he turned to me with a light smile that seemed to say everything was in order. Without realizing it, I smiled back at him. After finishing work at the lumber workshop, James invited me and the manager to grab some coffee and relax a bit after the busy afternoon. We stepped out of the workshop as the midday sun softened, with a gentle breeze carrying the lingering warmth of spring. James led the way, and the three of us walked to a small cafe along the village road, where a few wooden tables were set under the shade of green trees. The cafe wasn't crowded, with only a few patrons sipping their coffee while soft music played from an old speaker mounted on the wall. I chose a table near the corner, next to a small window overlooking the red dirt road stretching into the distance. James ordered 3 glasses of iced black coffee, and soon, the clinking sound of ice cubes echoed as the cafe owner placed them in front of us. The rich aroma of roasted coffee filled the air, mingling with a faint trace of cigarette smoke drifting over from a nearby table, creating an atmosphere that felt both familiar and comforting. I picked up my glass and took a sip, the light bitterness spread across my tongue, cooled by the slowly melting ice. James glanced at me, then suddenly stood up, saying he was going to buy a small gift. Before I could ask what it was, he had already walked into a nearby convenience store. A few minutes later, he returned holding a pair of soft fabric gloves and a light blue scarf. Handing them to me, he gently said that it was getting late in the day and I should wear the scarf to keep warm. Embarrassed, I accepted them, my fingers fiddling with the edge of the scarf as an unexplainable warmth stirred in my chest. But that wasn't all. James pulled out his phone and asked me to sit still so he could take a few photos. Flustered, I adjusted my hair and gave an awkward smile for the camera while he kept complimenting how pretty I looked, his voice warm like the late afternoon sunlight. The clicking sounds of his phone camera filled the air as he reviewed the photos and then showed them to me with a bright smile. Looking at myself in the pictures, with flushed cheeks, I couldn't help but smile back at him. The manager sitting next to us joined in on the fun, teasing me with a few playful remarks that made our little coffee table livelier. We started chatting about everything, from work at the lumberyard and the new shipment to simple everyday stories. Laughter rang out brightly, blending with the clinking sound of glasses whenever someone took another sip. The coffee was bitter, yet my heart felt inexplicably sweet as if all the day's fatigue had melted away in our conversations. The manager shared how she first met James, while he recounted his early days working at the workshop in his deep and captivating voice. I listened intently, occasionally chiming in with a comment or two, feeling an unexpected closeness as though we were old friends. Outside, the sunlight faded gradually, fiery red hues of sunset stretched across the village road, signaling that evening was near. As we finished our coffee, James checked his watch and mentioned that it was getting late. He offered to give me a ride home. I nodded and stood up, still clutching the scarf he had given me, reluctant to leave this warm and cozy moment behind. The manager waved goodbye and told me to visit again soon. James started his old motorbike. Its engine hummed softly in contrast to the quiet surroundings. Sitting behind him, I lightly held onto his shirt as I felt each breeze sweep through my hair, carrying with it a faint aroma of coffee lingering on us. The road home appeared ahead, long and peaceful, as the last rays of sunlight cast our shadows on the ground, stretching far into the distance. When I arrived home, I pushed open the creaky wooden gate and invited James inside, feeling eager to show him something small yet full of pride. I ran to the corner of the house and brought out the 2 brand new watering cans I had bought that morning, holding them up in front of him with eyes sparkling like a child showing off a new toy. James looked at me with a gentle smile and nodded, saying he would help me try them out right away. Rolling up his sleeves, he grabbed one of the watering cans and stepped into the small garden behind the house, where rows of lush green vegetables awaited watering. I stood on the porch, watching him as streams of water sprayed from the can, glistening in the sunset and landing on the vegetable leaves like sparkling jewels. While James watered the garden, I stepped into the kitchen to prepare dinner, my heart filled with a simple joy. I rinsed rice clean and poured it into the pot, its fresh aroma wafting up as the water began to boil on the stove. I stir-fried vegetables and sliced meat, with the sizzling sound from the hot oil blending with the fragrant scent of fried onions that filled the small kitchen. My hands moved quickly as I worked, humming a tune and imagining us sitting down to enjoy dinner together. James walked in from the garden, his shirt still damp with a few drops of water. He said the vegetables were all watered and now it was just up to me to finish cooking. Smiling, I told him to rest for a while since dinner was almost ready. We sat down at an old wooden table under the warm glow of a yellow bulb hanging from the ceiling, creating a cozy atmosphere as dusk settled in. James began telling me about his days working at the lumberyard, his deep voice drawing me into every story. I listened intently, occasionally asking questions, feeling an unexpected sense of closeness. Our gentle conversation flowed like a breeze through the garden, bringing with it a rare sense of peace. The aroma of freshly cooked rice filled the air as it finished cooking, and I stood up to set it on the table when suddenly James's phone rang loudly. He frowned as he answered it, his expression gradually changing while he responded in a low voice with a few brief words. Turning to me with an apologetic look, he explained that there was an urgent matter at the lumberyard and he had to leave immediately, unable to stay for dinner. A pang of disappointment hit me, but I nodded with a smile and told him not to worry about me. He stood up, grabbed his jacket, and hurried out the door, his footsteps echoing quickly on the ground outside. I followed him to the porch and stood silently as his figure disappeared down the dark village road. Night fell, and darkness slowly enveloped my small home, leaving only the sound of crickets chirping in the quiet space. I turned back inside and looked at the table already set for dinner. Though the scent of warm rice lingered in the air, my heart felt strangely empty. The watering can James had used earlier still lay near the vegetable beds in the garden, a trace of moments that had just passed. Sitting down at my chair under the yellow light casting shadows on the wall, I watched my silhouette stretch long and still. As night deepened, silence filled my home entirely, leaving only me with fleeting memories of his figure fading into the distance.